Hello, everybody. It's the Spice Must Flow. I'm back again, and today I'm going to talk on the subject of tolerance and diversity. See, nowadays we're all told that tolerance is a necessity. Okay, that we all have to be tolerant, and we're also taught that diversity is a strength. Right? It's in a lot of the corporate manuals. It's certainly a message given by the government. It is something that you see all throughout the West, even if you don't really see it anywhere else. Um, and we're told that we have to have tolerance, right? We're also taught that diversity is a strength. Um, and neither one of these things are actually good per se, right? In other words, both of these things are circumstantially good. In certain cases, it's a good idea to be tolerant. In certain cases, it is a good thing if you have diversity, right? In other contexts, they're not good at all. They're dangerous, bad. We could argue evil if you want to put it that way, right? Um, and it led me to think about Star Trek, as many things do. And I thought of the Vulcans, right? The Vulcans have a saying, infinite diversity in infinite combinations, right? And they even have this little sign, it's a triangle with a circle in it. It's supposed to mean, it's supposed to mean infinite diversity in infinite combinations, right? They're supposed to be all about diversity. Okay, and coming from Trek, you can get it, you can understand it. We're talking about Star Trek. It was a show written by a fairly left-wing guy at the time, right? So the issue is that the Vulcans really are not into diversity at all. Okay, the Vulcans live on a planet where other people they can visit for a time, right? Theoretically, and they never exactly explicitly say it, right? That nobody lives on Vulcan other than Vulcans. But it does seem that they probably are a huge supermajority. Um, the Vulcans, really aren't about diversity at all. They might say they are, but they're not. And it kind of reminded me of a lot of people who now champion diversity. There's a ton of people out there that I've known who, to them, diversity is being able to go to a place and get a gyro with shawarma in it. It is that Ethiopian restaurant with Dorawat. It is wearing a kimono, okay? Um, but asking really deep questions about other cultures, such as how do you interact with others? How much trust are you going to show people that aren't like you? How much trust are you going to show people that are like you? How does family operate, right? Like, how will you get married? Who will take care of you when you are old? If you are to have children, are you going to have children? If you're going to have children, how many? Under what circumstances? Okay. How do you treat others, right? These questions really aren't asked that hard by people who advocate for diversity. Okay. I guess you could say, superficial aspects of other cultures are what they really concern themselves with. They literally seem to go out of their way to never really analyze that hard how people who are not like them live. And I think the reason why is that if they had to actually ask serious questions about others and how they choose to live life, they might not like what they saw. Okay? And this ultimately becomes the problem you have with diversity and why it's not really a strength at all. Even when you find groups that are different, and they're able to get along, chances are they're getting along not because of what's different about them, but what's the same or what is at least similar enough that they can come together. And when they do come together, if they come together over a long enough period of time, eventually you get to a point where there isn't diversity because they melded cultures. Like, they melded together two different cultures into a new culture that isn't diverse at all, right? And that is kind of an interesting thing. That is part of the problem of diversity as a virtue, as a strength, right? Even in the various things that I've read, of people talking, for instance, of the future and how the future we will, we will all become one people, right? First of all, that in and of itself is problematic. That you would think that there's an inevitability to that, but if we were all one people, we wouldn't be diverse at all. So is diversity a strength or is it not? Should we all form a monoculture as the entire world? Should we form a monoculture, or should we remain various other cultures? Right. So when you really break it down, diversity is basically nonsensical as a concept philosophically that you see in our modern world. Right. What diversity really means is, I hope we can all get along if we can respect each other enough to do so. And in general, diversity works much better for the wealthy, regardless of who they are, than it does for the poor or the middle class. Okay? And you can see it regardless of which rich people we are talking about. Okay? As for the idea of tolerance, well, that might look like a virtue, except it's really not. What I mean by that is, should you be tolerant of people that are different than you? Of course you should. Should you be tolerant of people who think differently than you? Of course you should, right? There's a lot of room for tolerance within a wide variety of contexts. The place where you get into a problem with tolerance is when someone else is not tolerant, right? So, to take an example, right? It's a cliche example, but it's a good one. There's a reason why it's a cliche. Can you tolerate Muslims, right? Well, I suppose you can, as long as they can tolerate you. But how often do Muslims tolerate others? And the answer is, of course, they don't very well or very often. And that's just historical fact. They don't tend to tolerate non-Muslims very well at all. In fact, it's written into the Quran that they really can't tolerate anyone who is a polytheist, right? That it specifically says you're supposed to kill any polytheist, any person who believes in multiple gods, or those who believe in no God, unless they become Muslim. And they only tolerate Jews and Christians if Jews and Christians decide to take a subordinate role underneath them and obtain what's called dhimmi status, which basically involves not preaching at all and paying a tax to Muslim rulers, right? That's in the Quran. I don't know what to tell you about that, right? It's in their book. Okay, now some Muslims might not follow the book totally, right? And they may decide that's not a great idea, and that's all well and good if they do, but it's still in the book. So you either have somebody as a Muslim deciding to be a bad Muslim and not follow their book, or you have somebody being a good Muslim and therefore being intolerant. So if you are going to be tolerant towards someone that is intolerant, how's tolerance a virtue? That would be the line at which you have to say, well, we have to now be intolerant, right? Which makes tolerance really a shit virtue at the end of the day. You can say that you're tolerant, you can say it's good under a variety of circumstances, but taking it as an absolute virtue, you can't really do from a logical perspective. Not really. So the real question that I've asked myself many times is, why is it that tolerance and diversity are considered good, right? When there's obviously problems with diversity as a strength, as a good, as an absolute good. And there's obviously problems with tolerance as a good, as an absolute good. Why are these things paraded as things that we need to strive towards? The only answer I've really ever been able to come up with, and believe me, I've looked at everybody's answers, right? I've looked at those who say that these are good things. I've looked at people who say they are not, and I've looked at them from various perspectives within on that construct. I've seen the everything from the "it's the Jews" answer from people who normally basically believe that Jews are responsible for everything bad, to just simply, oh, they're stupid, right? The people who believe that are stupid, and they therefore think, blah, blah, blah. What I've discovered is that there's only one explanation that really fits on why diversity is considered a positive and why tolerance is considered a positive, and they're considered a positive no matter what. And it isn't stupidity, and it damn sure isn't the Jews, right? And it isn't anything in between. It isn't college and what they teach there. What it is that fundamentally, the people who are advocating for these things have placed a, a basically religious faith and fervor into these values. Okay, so they believe them, that they've placed a religious patina, if you will, over a social construct. Okay, and in the same way that if you have a religious belief structure and you believe it so hard and so totally that it's a matter of faith, it's not a matter of logic or reason. Okay, you cannot be convinced with a strong enough uh, argument. It doesn't matter what anybody says, and it doesn't matter what the evidence says. It doesn't matter how good my argument is against it. You believe it as an article of faith, and you will do anything and everything you can to support the concept. Because if you were ever to give up the concept, if you were ever to give up believing what you believe, then the infrastructure, if you will, of how you live your life would collapse. And this is why it is that that tolerance and diversity really exist as virtues in society, and why it is that you see them in corporate training manuals, why you see them in government supported public announcements, why it is that you hear them talked about in colleges and on college campuses, why it is that this stuff is taught everywhere. It is because it is a religious principle, or at least it's taken on the importance of a religious principle in society. So, I don't know. Those are just a few of my thoughts. And now for me to be very intolerant, furthermore, I consider Islam must be destroyed.